Ashraf Kabir is heading technology consulting at Visionet Systems, a global technology and services company focused on digital transformation, cloud, data, and AI solutions for enterprises. With that, Ashraf, we're thrilled to have you at the live event today, and I am very much looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. This is a great opportunity and I really appreciate this opportunity. But I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit of a kind of a trend that is now coming into the market in terms of consumer behaviors, especially related to e-commerce and how typical companies are actually evolving in this space and what we are thinking about it and how our customers are also thinking about it. So it's very interesting, and I want you to do something with me right now. And it's a small experiment. Now, if you're driving, don't do this. You could save this for later. But if you're at your desk, just open ChatGPT in your browser, type in your company's name, and ask what's the best company for, and whatever you do, right? I mean, whatever, if you sell, just mention that and see what results come back. If your brand isn't named, or worse, if a competitor is named and described in glowing terms, it means that you are becoming invisible. And this is not a glitch. There's actually your 2026 revenue forecast quietly leaking out in real time. And it's been leaking out for months without you knowing. And here's the part that gets me. Most CXOs I talk to, they react to this moment by saying, yeah, I mean, okay, we need to buy a tool. There must be some kind of a geo platform tool out there that fixes this problem. And I get it. I mean, I think, that's the muscle memory we've built over 20 years of SEO. We've seen a visibility problem. We've bought a vendor. We've bought a tool. We've installed a dashboard. We've seen the numbers go up. But that muscle memory this time is going to fail us because AI visibility is not a tooling problem. It is a narrative problem at the first. And I think it is also a controls problem because a lot of these platforms are now taking the control of the customer journey away from the different retailers, the e-commerce vendors, e-commerce platforms. So what I want to do today is basically give you three thoughts, right? I want to show you some of the things that we're seeing in the market, right? In terms of the numbers. I want to give you a little bit of a framework in terms of how to think about this in a more practical way. And also, what can you do immediately to try to fix this? So I'll start with the numbers, right? And this is a report that you would have seen different types of reports, but this is something that has come out quite recently. And there are other factors as well. So for example, most of the brands are saying that they're seeing a lot of these autonomous traffic coming from different AI platforms. Some of them have claimed that there are about 3 million type, visits, and it can vary depending on what type of retailer or what type of customers you have in your segmentation. But there are three numbers that really kind of tell us about the consumer pattern. First of all, Y Combinator has predicted that the traditional search engine volumes are going to drop by about 25% by the end of 2026. About half of it would actually be AI mediated by 2028. Now, that means that traditional ways in which Google search used to work is going to finish, and then there will be new kinds of modes of engagement. And people will not be actually clicking on blue links, they will actually be conversationally asking these platforms. Number two, that we are seeing that, the number of traffic that is coming in is much more than the number that is actually converting. So most of the brands say that, that they're visiting increased traffic, but actually the number that they can attribute towards conversion is much less. So that they're saying less than 1% is actually converting. And number three, Washington Post actually did this kind of an experiment. They actually measured the visitors who came from the AI mediated traffic. They were 4 to 5 times more likely to convert than people who were coming from natural means. So that basically goes to say that, people who are coming in, and I know that a few of them are converting, but those that are converting are really definitely converting. So what do we do? What do we do about this narrative problem? And I think this is where you have to think a little bit differently. And SEO world, when you had search engine optimization, when a buyer really searched for a particular need, Google gave them 10 links. They gave them 10 options, right? And the buyer used to scan them and they could click on each one of them and to get more details. But now they get a paragraph. And whatever comes in that paragraph is what AI thinks about you. And that is basically a synthesis that it builds based on number of different factors. It builds it on the basis of how authentic you are, how authoritative you are, how you are represented in all of the platforms like the forums, the chat forums, and how do you appear on the social media, for example. So I think this is basically a framework that'll help you understand how you can actually help and tackle this. One is that you have to start with positioning. Which brand representation, which is your customer, who's your customer, what do you sell, and who is your competition? Where are those competitions getting mentioned, and whether you are there or not? And that's where I think the positioning becomes very important, and it has to be from the drawing board. You have to think about that. On the recommendations part, yes, there are toolings out there and that we can use. And we can then trigger the recommendations to come out using AI to tell how basically your content, how it is currently available, can be changed so that it becomes more readable for all of the AI surfaces. So that's the recommendation part. The third part is experience. And what I mean by experience is that you start to monitor all of this AI traffic that is coming to your edge. You put in certain tools out there or certain capability that starts to understand how the traffic is coming up to your website. And then the fourth is how do you become more ready for different types of commerce that's going to come in the future. That's where personalization becomes more important. So if a person is coming after he's looked at Google AI mode and seen your particular product and they've clicked on it, when they land on your website, they should get automatically a hydrated cart. They should get an experience which is personalized and much more beneficial for that particular next step because they've already decided. So how do you focus on these four different pillars and how do you make that into real action is what we call the steps for agentic commerce readiness. And we do have capability, which is already there and what we can do is we can leverage and we can manage that capability in a way that makes this a complete loop so that whatever you do when you're testing for a particular AI visibility, you're able to action on it and you can monitor it. And then you can actually convert that type of customer into actual revenue. So what we typically do when we engage with our customers, we talk about AI outcomes. We talk about agentic commerce outcomes. And we talk about how do we improve the positioning and the AI visibility. We identify the gap, and then we create the content creation workflows, which are AI assisted and human approved. And you should be able to, through that, be able to manage the narrative on all of these different surfaces. And the third point is how can we actually do attribution tracking, sitting on the edge, looking at the experience side of things, understanding the traffic and the channel recognition, the reporting around it. And then the fourth point is how do you design the product feeds, the APIs, the MCP layer, so that you're becoming more readable to all of these different types of agent platforms. So I'll pick one example of that and kind of explain a little bit from how our AI visibility platform actually can support different retailers. So we are talking about the agent readability. So how you can turn a storefront that currently exists, which is more human readable, it appears in the form of heroes in terms of JavaScripts that you put on their website. And that basically is more for the attention of the human. But how do you become more interesting for an agent who's coming and maybe scrolling or looking at your website? So there are four parts of it. One is the content layer. So we need to actually make sure that whatever we have on our website currently can be marked down for our agent. So how do we convert that into an LLM enabled or LLM readable format so that the agents can read? The second part is another thing that we're trying to build, which is basically web MCP layer, where all of those JavaScripts that you've got, if you can convert that into actions and we can convert that into SCP, then we can actually make all of those agents action on them. The third part is what we call the discovery part, where we build the contracts for the agents so that they can actually, in the world when agentic commerce is becoming more and more a reality, we have to also become more discoverable to all the agents. So we have to give them and publish them certain capabilities that we offer. And the fourth part is how do you start attributing and how do you start measuring whatever a new revenue that you're going to achieve through this interface? So I think that pretty much covers some of the topics. I also wanted to leave you with some examples. So here's an example of positioning. We do have the tooling. We also support working with different types of tools that are already there in the market. We can work with them, but we can help you position yourself much better in front of all of the AI surfaces that you have to monitor for. Then we do give you recommendations in the form of very specific recommendations based on the customer segment, based on the different types of need that the customers are coming up with. What are the kinds of ways in which your content can be recreated so that you become more attractive to this channel? And the third point is, how do you start measuring the different types of traffic, whether it's coming from ChatGPT or Google AI mode or Perplexity or any other format? There are about 12 or so different prominent AI surfaces. We can definitely look at that traffic, understand or attribute that traffic to certain channels and give you that picture. And the fourth part is we do provide the tooling, which helps you business users personalize. So whatever traffic, if it is an AI agent and that is detected, and if it is coming from a particular channel, we can actually help you identify that intent of that particular shopper who's coming in and also help you attribute that and redirect them to a particular personalized page, which is much more impactful for that particular action that the user is intending for. So I wanted to leave with these thought processes. I hope I've been able to first of all establish that there is a different mode of thinking that is required. Secondly, tooling is not the only solve. You also need to think about how you basically think about a framework so that you create the end-to-end loop. And thirdly, how do you basically work along with this framework and make sure that you're able to, first of all, measure the outcomes and see how you can actually really create an impact using this channel. Does that make sense?
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate that deep dive presentation. I think a lot of great learning in there, to be honest, Ashraf. Can you share a little bit for some of the listeners that are on the other side of this event, a little bit about some of the kinds of organizations that you're working with at Visionet to help them, fill in the details and get over the line with these types of engagements?
Yeah, so the types of customers that we're working with are mostly chief digital officers, CIOs, CMOs as well in certain cases, who are basically thinking about reimagining how their current ways of marketing is working, because they are being here's an issue, right, with this particular channel. It's a problem of control as well, because most of the time these marketing activities were performed where you could actually control the customer journey, and now actually that control is now being provided by these platform vendors. So a lot of times, the initial knee-jerk reaction is that, let's make ourselves more visible. So let's give them the product feeds and let them decide what the customer journey has to be, how the narrative has to be built. And that's really, I think, where it's a control problem, where everybody is trying to seek some answers.
Makes a lot of sense. And I know that there will be a lot of unique questions from the audience. I know a lot of people are wondering how some of this might relate to their specific organization or, challenges. So I know graciously you're joining us on the next Q&A panel, which is coming up in just a few minutes. So for everybody that's listening in, you have a Q&A box in front of you. Type in any questions that you have. And on this next panel, we'll be happy to get to as many of those as we can and provide some real life answers for your real unique questions. So that's coming up in just a few minutes. And Ashraf, I appreciate that fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much.